Okay, so again, guys, I'm gonna get introduced, then I'm gonna do some quick overviews of some stuff. Taylor, you're gonna probably go after. It's gonna be myself and
Okay, so again, guys, I'm gonna go
oh wow, it's a big,
overviews of some stuff.
it's a remarkable delay though. Hmm.
After it's gonna be
There you are.
How's the delay now? Should we leave and come back?
What?
Is the delay pretty bad? Should we leave and come
No,
back?
I was confused because I was listening to the live stream that I just set up, and that's a delay, but I just put a chat in here of the live stream, and at some point, if in the middle of this, you guys wanna, I'm gonna post it actually on LinkedIn and then share it. Why not? So
Sure.
I'm gonna create a post and send you guys the post that you guys can then repost. Feel free, you guys, to take this post, which I just created on LinkedIn, and post it, or take the link to the live stream and create a much better post. But right now, because of the situation, I don't want to have to be writing like tagging everybody, but it's there and it'll probably be a bigger audience out there in the ethos than what would be great if somebody wants to screenshot all of us and post that with the link. It's also very cool. I'm gonna I just screenshot. I don't know if we're gonna. Okay.
I'll be back in 1 minute. Just a sec.
Okay. Great.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Okay.
We found out what a couple weeks before. So eCommerce, and us, then they were all the MSU, but all got the room separate for this best. When you guys know what your intention of automation is.
Just so you guys are aware, this is what it looks like so far. So I'm going to go through some quick highlights of general cross-border e-commerce. I'm going to start getting into this, and I'm going to ask Jeff to come and talk a little bit about those phases of e-commerce in terms of the marketplace piece. But then I'm going to go through top considerations, just highlight them. If anyone has things they want to shout out to, let me know. But then I'm going to go, Jason, to you. Jason, we've got questions here, but before we dive into the MOR model, I was going to go back to that later. I was going to go with, let me just hide this one. I was going to go to this, which you may remember. And if you want to, this is all stuff from your old life in Digital River.
Sure. Yeah.
You want to talk about some of that stuff?
I'm happy to. Whatever you put on the slide, I'll be like Anchorman. I'll talk to it.
Okay. I don't know why all these images are not here right now.
I'm Ron Burgundy?
Huh?
No. Whatever you put on the slide, I'll talk to.
Yeah, for some reason, these images have disappeared on me, but they were here this morning. That makes me worried. Let's see what happens when I go full screen. Okay. We'll see when we go full screen. We're about a minute out. Let me just, okay. Jeff is off camera. Let me just get you here. Everybody. Okay, we're getting people in. Not everybody's on camera, but I think most of you are. Okay. I'm gonna move that up there, maybe. Okay. Jim, I named you.
Oh, no.
You look like the Godfather in there. You
does.
kind of have a little.
Maybe an offer.
Yeah. Hey, man.
See,
Good to see you. How you doing?
shave my beard off. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I did too.
Did too.
I must have read it in the cards. Are you leaving or are you just
No,
staying?
I'm gonna sit back here.
Okay, I'd be so hurt if you just walked in and then left.
No, I'm not gonna do that.
Okay.
I mean.
You don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but, okay, so you're introducing, I can't talk yet. I guess stand up.
Right.
Okay.
First of all, I hate. So, welcome. Let's get started here. Jim Foley from the ASBDC International Interest section. A reminder, we meet as a section tomorrow at 12:30. And that's open to anyone. But probably figured out already, the two international tracks are this room and the room right down the hall. So at every breakout during the conference, you have two options. And of course, through your app, you could find out what the current options are. The intersection will be in the meeting down there. Otherwise, nothing's going on. All the intersections, we're up to 20 intersections in ASBDC. It's amazing, isn't it? I think we were the second. Technology was maybe, anyway, it doesn't matter. We're trying something new. So we wanted to do a really deep dive in international e-commerce in a really powerful way, meaning bringing in the best of the best. And ASBDC has been very generous in supporting the travel costs of many of our speakers for the international track. But to bring in this kind of numbers would have been impossible. So what we thought we'd do is I've never thought of doing a hybrid in a conference, but we all still have the benefit of the networking, the lunch that we just did, the plenary that we did. That still is happening. And we've got the benefit of Josh, who is undoubtedly, I would say, the godfather of global e-commerce, not to mention past work in China, where he stood up one of their e-commerce centers. He is a past foreign commercial service officer. And then after that, life, by the way, also Mandarin and Spanish and some other languages thrown in. You've seen him before. He has presented at ASBDC a number of different times. In fact, probably one of our first ever really deep look at international e-commerce was Washington, DC. And Josh came and presented at that. So because we're in Atlanta and because digital was part of the theme of this conference, when the intersection got together to kind of plan this out, we had to, of course, go to Josh. And Josh said, well, wait a second, let's do some topics that we don't typically do and that we haven't done. And to do that, we want to bring in, as I'm showing to all the group there, we want to bring in these amazing, and this is just one that Josh has put together. So I hope this works because we did have to have ASBDC install a wired internet connection so that we had good, dependable, that surprisingly expensive. But let's just see how it goes, because I think with Josh here to facilitate and we can still network with all the folks. We can make sure you get contact information. So we hope it's the best of both worlds. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a chance to see these guys. One guy's at an airport, just as FYI. So with that, please welcome Josh and the whole group.
Hey, thanks for having me and thanks for coming in. So yeah, as Jim was saying, there's just so many great people out there that know a lot of information that I wanted to make sure could get in front of you. And this is the easiest, best way in today's modern world to do it. I will be peppering them with a lot of questions as well. And I encourage all of you to as well. There's a lot of brain trust here. Just a shout out to, if you do want a QR code or contact any of these folks, whether or not they like it or not, I've put their QR codes to some of their LinkedIn's. I'm trying to get this thing out of the way, but maybe up there for now. I don't know where to put it. Why does this have to be there?
Do not need it. Yeah.
Oh, I don't need it. There you go. It heard me. The QR codes, you just zoom in. I know there's multiple QR codes, so don't do the whole screen. You just zoom in and you can get their LinkedIn or whatever it is. You'll see that throughout. I have 4 sessions between today and tomorrow, just so you know. So just to quickly review, we've got cross-border fundamentals of cross-border e-commerce. We're going to talk about today. We're going to talk later on today. We're going to do social commerce for cross-border. Definitely on the cutting edge of discussion. Social commerce is definitely the channel that's growing fastest for sales, but people rarely talk about it right now as cross-border, because when I talk about social, we're talking about IG, Instagram, and TikTok. And TikTok isn't even enabled for cross-border, but there's ways to do it. And we're going to have an expert from China, from Douyin side come in, and an expert from Latin America for social commerce come in about an hour or so after this. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about B2B e-commerce. How do you leverage e-commerce for B2B sales? And then we'll also be talking about the fundamentals of fulfillment, D2C, direct to consumer, using fulfillment channels as well tomorrow. So 4 sessions. So please tell your friends. Okay, so we're gonna go away. Okay, so I just put this up because Jeff told me he made a whole slide. So I want to just take a moment and say, Jeff, thanks for the slide. You look a lot better in this one than the one I chose of you, but I thought it was better to do that. I'm going to ask each of you to do a quick intro of who you are. You know what? We'll start with you, Jeff, because of the slide. Just because of the slide, Jeff. You go first. We'll
Very good.
Yeah.
I can't see the slide, so I don't really know what good or bad photo is there, but hopefully I look relatively like myself. I'm Jeff. I've been doing China digital since 1999. When I started, there were only 500,000 people online in China. I was with Sina, which is the first sort of the Yahoo of China. We created Weibo, which is the Twitter of China, and did a lot of the first digital deals for Nike, Johnson & Johnson, Pernod Ricard, a lot of first digital deals. I then had my own consultancy slash marketing agency that helped US and European companies go to market in Asia. Then I joined a company called BorderX Lab, which was is a cross-border e-commerce platform. I ran all the partnerships and was one of the founding partners of that company for a number of years. We were the top international partner for retailers like Macy's and Nordstrom and Foot Locker and Finish Line, as well as a number of brands. Then I spent a year with Poison Douwu, which is the #1 Gen Z platform in China, has about 350 million users. So was with them, helping them with their US market entry, but also understand how to bring US and European goods to the Greater China platform with more variety. And over the last 3 months, I joined a startup called Crossterra, which basically builds websites for companies if they want to go to market in some of the dynamic markets like China or Southeast Asia or Latin America or Middle East. We build the localized mobile-ready websites, and so you can sell there immediately, and we do it without any upfront fees, just as a percentage of sales. So I'm running partnerships and doing strategy there now.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff and I worked together on a bunch of different projects, and some of the issues that he's dealt with around marketplace entry. For example, BorderX Labs talks about how do you sell through a marketplace, so into China, where you place inventory on a marketplace over there, but you would ship inventory or product from the US direct into the consumer overseas in China. So very interesting options that are out there. We're going to let's go backwards to Taylor.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I have been in e-commerce and digital marketing for over 15 years. Generally, as an in-house guy, I have worked at a few agencies, but I prefer in-house. Prior to that, I was an IT nerd, so I like computers and all that type of stuff. Currently at a company called Belay Brands. We're a group, a global group. We own and operate 4 different brands. One's Belay, one is Spy Optic, one is Serengeti Eyewear, and one is Belay Safety. So I'm stoked to be here and excited to share some information.
Taylor's going to talk a little bit later around SEO optimization, but also around the structure of your e-commerce website. A lot of people talk about, do I have a .com globally, or do I have my .fr, do I have .cn? And a lot of agencies you'll talk to love to make money telling people they need multiple websites in multiple languages with multiple CNs and CRs and FRs and all that. And the reality is, he'll talk a little bit about the current wisdom around that space. Jason.
All right.
2/3 of your face, Jason.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah, we'll take whatever we can get. We need just your mouth.
Is it my good? Is it my good 2/3? All right. So hey,
yeah,
folks.
I mean, arguably yes.
All right. I'm Jason Nyeth. I'm president of a software company called Shopware. We're an e-commerce platform business that really serves the mid-market. And the reason I'm on the panel here with Josh and team is because I spent the lion's share of my career with a company called Digital River, who really invented the category of merchant of record. And it's really the ability to outsource all of the complexities of cross-border to somebody else. And in the role that I currently sit in at Shopware, I have the ability to kind of look at the unique problems the merchants are trying to solve and really try to help advise them on the best paths to solve them. Sometimes it's DIY, sometimes it's working with partners and really getting the most of that decision. So honored to be here. Hopefully the third of my face you're not seeing, you're not missing out too much.
Well, now we know what we're missing, and we see your whole face now. Thank you very much.
Oh, perfect.
It's awesome. Thank you. So Jason, again, so Digital River, Merchant of Record, we're going to talk about it a little later, but the concept of basically saying, hey, I'm going to sell product overseas, but essentially I'm going to make a domestic sale to another entity that will then take care of the rest of your international. Interesting model, slightly more expensive, but it depends on where you want to put your money, right? He doesn't work there anymore, so I can say all these things. But he also works for a platform in e-commerce for mid-market companies that it's kind of like a Shopify or BigCommerce and others similar to those, but better. I have to say that because he's here. Let me just quickly level set here on cross-border e-commerce. We're all in this room because we want to hear more about it. 30% of global e-commerce will be cross-border by 2028. When we say that, we say global cross-border, meaning selling into a market where you are not headquartered, where you're not actually from, right? So I don't mean building infrastructure and a distributor base in Europe and then selling from making product in Europe and selling. I mean cross-border, selling from the US, for example, to another market. We've got 7.3 trillion in sales via cross-border by 2025. These numbers, frankly, like great. Who cares? It's a lot, but does it really affect your small business? But I just want to give you some idea, right? 82% of global consumers have made a cross-border purchase. This is increasingly so, and it's becoming increasingly easy. So the idea of getting your products from A to Z is not as hard. The question is how to do it more efficiently, especially for the small business. I'm moving them all down here. I just want to talk a little bit about the phases that most of your companies are going to go through. Most of them will start with the direct-to-consumer model in the lower left. They'll start, when I say what I mean is they're going to have their website, they're going to start selling passively into another market. Maybe people will come to their website and say, hey, I got 3 people from Brazil who just ordered some product. Okay, that's cross-border, that's the dabbling in. And there's ways to do it more or less robust, but it's always going to be a little bit more costly from a shipping perspective. And you're not in market, you're not getting the feedback, but it's a good first phase. A lot of them will also start and move towards, and you can kind of do these almost in conjunction, marketplaces. And I'm going to throw in social commerce. So selling on Amazon, selling on TikTok or Instagram, selling on Rakuten in Japan, maybe selling on Tmall, selling on Shopee in Singapore, all of these things, right? And then you're going to start to localize. That's when you actually bring your product in country or you have a distributor and you're working with and you're localizing. Just to give you an idea, again, this is not rocket, this is not set in stone, but it's a kind of a conceptually the progression. Major things to consider if you're going to kind of just say, hey, what should my clients be talking about or thinking about? Channels. This is just for cross-border channels. You got to figure out where you're going to sell through. You've got 4 options in life: marketplaces, social commerce. So marketplaces, Amazon, Shopee, Rakuten; social commerce, TikTok, Instagram; brick and mortar. We know what brick and mortar is, and your own website. Are you going to be doing B2B or are you going to do D2C? We're going to talk on the B2B session tomorrow with a company that's chosen to go more B2B, but how do you do B2B with the e-commerce component? How are you going to deal with your digital marketing? Are you going to do it from the US, or are you going to have in-country agencies? Fulfillment and logistics, again, lots of complexities there. Payments and facilitation, how are you going to get paid? How are you going to pay out service providers? And your financing, how are you going to deal with financing? And legal compliance and protection, labeling, all those other issues, duties and taxes. We're going to talk about a lot of this stuff now, so I'm not going into them here. I just want to give you a quick snapshot of what things you should be thinking about for global e-commerce. We have some questions for Jason, but I'm not going to ask you those now yet, at this point. But gosh, it's a lot of fun doing this. I'm going to put them right over your face. And then, but before we go into that, man, I can't do that just yet. Get up there. this is what I like to call the iceberg. I stole this from Jason's former company. Essentially, when you're talking about cross-border, this is the iceberg model. If you want, it's a great photo. To me, this is everything that's going on in cross-border. Customer service and your brand, blue sounds like the things that your clients really want to care about and should care about. All this other stuff is the stuff that makes your eyes glaze over. Those are the things that you don't want to have to deal with, but you want to find somebody competent to do. Localization, compliance, payments and taxes, and logistics. There are various ways to do it. I don't know if we even need to. Do you want to talk a little bit, Jason, about some of these complexities? Let me see.
Yeah.
We'll talk about logistics first. You want to go into that?
Well, honestly, I think
Sure.
the way to frame this up, go back to the iceberg if you don't mind.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll go back to that iceberg. Love the iceberg.
Yeah, I think this is probably the simplest view. Okay, so the way that I think about this is that these are requirements of doing business, and you can hire in expertise to facilitate and manage these things for your company, or you can outsource them. Simply put, that is your choice. And most people, when they think about selling a good or a service to somebody else, they really think of it as a payments problem. But when you start to try and book the revenue, do the customer support, get the product to them, get it returned if it doesn't go well, allow them to pay in a certain currency, get the money in and out of the country, you start to realize that selling into other markets, it actually really can be really expensive and a lot of times not worth it. And so the reason I like to start with this slide is if you think about the skills that you have in your organization, a lot of companies are purpose-built to make widgets and market those widgets and sell those widgets. And so they don't necessarily have people who are experts in compliance or currencies or those types of things. So the first thing I would ask a brand to do is really take a hard look in the mirror and say, do we have the skill sets to not only do it and set it up, but as things move and change and evolve, will we be able to add or modify our staff to support it? But it's really just to have a basis of understanding the complexity required of selling international. Anything to add, Josh?
Yeah. I know that Jeff has also worked a lot on this in terms of logistics and D2C and the whole piece of it. Do you have anything to add, Jeff?
Yeah, I to that point, I think a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. And there are a number of companies out there that, try to do the entire earth or the rest of the world. It's US and rest of the world. It's the old business model that US companies used to have. But the compliance and the tax issues and the shipping that you use to go to Western Europe or to Canada are completely different than what you're going to use to go to India or China or Southeast Asia. And you have to understand that. And at least doing the homework or at least talking to someone and luckily you have a panel here of people who talk to you for free, so you don't have to talk to a lawyer or a compliance person. But I think it's very important. I have conversations all the time with companies. I was just talking to a celebrity-driven shapewear brand. I won't narrow it down for you, but it was that company, and they're doing a huge business in China right now, but it's all being done by a gray market, and they don't understand how important China is to their business because their site right now they've added Chinese shipping. But because they use a 25% customs model instead of the 9.1% customs model that's been built for cross-border e-commerce, and because they have an expensive courier service sending product to China, no one uses that channel. And therefore, everything is gray market, people who buy it here and then sell there or just flood the market that way. To have an understanding, exactly what those gray market channels are, how much they're selling of your product. You may already have a super popular product in some of these foreign markets that you just don't know about. And to that point, a healthy e-commerce business, they say it's about 15 to 30% is international traffic. So these are people who like your brand, who know your brand, who are coming there. In many cases, they can't purchase, or if they purchase, they're using a service to ship it within the US and then getting trans-shipped to where you are. Once again, it may look like a sale to Oregon or to Delaware or to any tax-free state. And then from there, it's going overseas or Miami in many cases. So, yeah, from that, yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, Jeff, let me just back it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So what they were talking about is there are a bunch of different ways to sell internationally. What we originally were talking about here in this thing called a merchant of record model, that's an option that it takes most of this off your plate. But there's hybrids of that where you have a company like, let's say, Zonos, which will put a layer on your website that does duty and tax calculations and currency localization. But then you still have to deal with the logistics of it. But you also have control of logistics, so you know a little bit more about who's buying your product. Or you have companies like a marketplace that may take your products and you just sell it to the marketplace. The marketplace deals with it from there. But the problem is then you don't know who's buying your stuff. The data is not necessarily owned by yourself. So there's a loss of data, but there's also a less of a need to do a lot of stuff, right? So there's all these different ways to do it. The question is how much you want to get involved in it. What Jeff is talking about in gray market is the idea that all these people are buying, and this is happening a lot. People have local mailboxes in the US. I say mailboxes, but it's not what you imagine. It's a massive warehouse. And they're selling, they're buying tons of product and then shipping it over to their local country. And you have no idea that's even happening. You know, I've had companies that say, I don't know how I'm selling millions of dollars to North Carolina. It's like, oh, that's cool. And then we spoke to USPS and they were like, yeah, we have probably 8 million packages that go into these cross-border things. I think it was every couple of months. So, you know, just Taylor, just to hear your voice a little bit, where are you guys selling currently globally?
Pretty much all of Europe, North America for D2C, all of Europe and North America. So US and Canada, and basically, you know.
And you place inventory in those markets, or you also sell from your website in the US?
So we have 3PLs or distribution points in each market.
Yeah, okay. And you're not necessarily the SMB, although you probably are because you have less than 500 employees, right?
Yes.
What's your annual revenue?
You know, high, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so let me just go through. I mean, I don't think we need to touch on a lot of this stuff. Challenges for merchants, we understood. Payments, although there's some reason the map image is just imagine a global map, but I think it's interesting to see some of let's talk a little bit about people who say, oh, I do global, I sell, and people transact with credit cards. And what are they losing? What opinions do you have on that? I'm going to start with Jason on that because I know that you lived in the Digital River kind of payment solution. But let's talk about cross-border payments and this slide, imagining the map.
Yeah, it's a beautiful slide. So first and foremost, I think there was a data point shared earlier that was really, really useful that I think is a touchstone for if you should consider a cross-border strategy. And it was that greater than 15% of your traffic is coming from outside of your kind of, let's say, homeland or North American market. So that's the first thing you'll need to recognize is where is the traffic actually coming to your site from? And it needs to be 15% or greater before you even should think about cross-border or international. Number two, the further you get from North America, US-based culture, the less pervasive credit cards are as the primary payment method, as we know it today, the Visa, the MasterCard, et cetera. You start to get into more cash-like societies that don't have the same credit worthiness or at least willingness to give credit as the American banking system. We take it for granted. But when you're an American and you go into any foreign countries, like the lion's share, like 90+% of all the credit cards we issue are international, meaning wherever you go in the world, your credit card will work. For most people outside of our country, say in Mexico or even in Europe, those are domestic credit cards, and they aren't meant to purchase internationally. And if they do, it comes with big fines and penalties, and their behaviors change. So because that dynamic exists, there's all sorts of other payment types like bank transfers, debit cards, all the sorts of buy now, pay laters. And depending on the country, there's a huge portion of unaddressable market or addressable market that you have to have in order to access its full potential. Now, the caveat on payments is, again, if you take 10, 20% of your company or your online revenue and you divide it by 7 countries, and then those countries have to have unique payment methods, you start to get into a physics problem as to how to make money. And so, my advice is to pick a couple of markets you want to deliver a really great localized experience, and then figure out how to wire in the payment methods required to do business in those regions. This list here, if you were to try and do all of those as a merchant, it would be a lot of work, and the return probably wouldn't come quick enough.
Which is the answer to, that's why there are people who do it for you.
Exactly.
Which is, what does that mean when you say people or companies? Because it's not all, this isn't solved only by a merchant of record model, which does everything for you. You can actually choose a payments company, I presume, like an Adyen, that would create global wallets and global enablement for you.
Yeah, they do. And in a lot of the scenarios, though, some of these unique payment methods, you have to pay an extreme premium to use if you get them through an Adyen, as an example. I don't actually know if that's the case, but as an example, or they might not be available at all. I mean, it wasn't until recently that you couldn't even get PayPal through your Adyen relationship, but now you can. So that's a big example. Another example in my life today. So the company that I work at is called Shopware. We're the largest e-commerce provider in Germany, and in that market, PayPal is like a 35% of all consumer transactions that happen in that country happen using PayPal as opposed to credit cards. So it's a really, really big example on how preference and kind of cultural relevance drive basically e-commerce success.
Which is good news for us in the SMB world, because PayPal is very easy to use for a small business, and a lot of your businesses probably have it on their website, right? So you can use PayPal, but it can't be your only solution.
That's right.
Okay. I see you looking around like, if your flight's being called.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay. I know you have I just want to go back to one thing that you guys said, just to make sure everybody understands that the point of 15% of your sales or your traffic has to be coming from overseas, to be able to really consider doing a global expansion. A lot of our companies don't have that yet. That's the point, is that they're just starting to step into it. I would look at 15% of their traffic from social commerce, though, and ask them the questions. How many people are coming to your TikTok or your Instagram already from overseas? It's an often overlooked but very basic data point that tells you who would like to know more about your brand. That could be a way in, and a little bit more of a softer number than saying 15% of your traffic on your website. Frankly, a lot of your companies are not going to have much. They don't have a lot of traffic on their US website. They're just not really driving. A lot of them are probably selling on Amazon, or some of them for sure. They are. So, okay, let me just.
Yeah,
no, but I think that
sorry,
please go ahead.
I was just going to say, to add to that, yeah, social media is really important. Everyone in the US, everyone in most of the countries outside the US still have our social media. They may use it at varying degrees, but China is the unique. Whenever someone wants to do a China market entry, I always tell them to look at Little Red Book, which is especially if they're in fashion or accessories, because that's where most people talk about things. There's a couple other platforms as well, but if you check your social media score and how many mentions you have, that'll give a pretty good indicator about how the brand's doing overseas as well. Even if you don't have official distribution channels there, you can at least see that there's a buzz and probably some uncaptured demand that's sitting there.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Jeff often talks about when we have overseas buyers or even distributors or just overseas people who want to support the brand, and the first thing they do is go to the Instagram or your TikTok, to see where your traffic is. The evaluation that we used to traditionally have, where I used to be at the embassy in Beijing, and people would show up and they'd have literally a printout of all the places they showed up to in magazines, and they have a bit book. Now, look, we're really well known in the US, and people would have no other way than just to look, oh, they were in Vogue and they were in okay, that looks like a good brand. And now they just, before you even get on the phone, they've already seen how many followers you have, what your engagement is. So if you speak to a company who says, well, I'm not really into social, I just want to go global, if you want to be online selling in any market, you've got to be able to show that you've done it well in the US online and social. So that's important. Before we I want Taylor to talk about SEO, talking about the marketing and the other piece right there. But is there anything, Jason, around this merchant of record, just because I kind of went away from it, but I want to just say, what is the merchant of record model a little deeper? And what are some of the, I think, God, Canva really screwed me on this day. All the images are gone, but the crux is there, Jason.
Yep, happy to take it. All right, folks. So the merchant of record model was invented in the early 2000s, and it's really a financial and legal.
Yep.
What it basically means is that a merchant, so you guys, can outsource the financial and legal liability of a transaction. And so in other words, you're letting someone else be the retailer on the transaction. And what does that mean? That means that the company you're outsourcing it to are going to sign up to have the bank account. So the money goes into their account. It means they're responsible for all tax. So the collection, the remittance of the tax, and the audit defense if you get audited. It means they're going to be responsible for the fraud to make sure the fraud screening happens. If there's a lawsuit regarding IP, they're the ones who are standing in front of it. It means that all of the financial reconciliation they're responsible for. So you're effectively outsourcing the back office functions of doing business in a certain market to somebody else. And my previous employer, Digital River, is one of the best at it, but there are other really, really great options. An emerging player is a company called Expand Now, and I'd recommend you check them out. But basically, instead of having to have 5 to 7 different relationships with different providers, you have one. And you benefit from them having the local selling entity, all of the payments, fraud, tax, and compliance set up, operationalized, and executed. And they do it all as part of a revenue share, which means if you sell $100 worth of product, they may take 4% of that, and they own all the expenses related to the transaction. So the smaller you are, the more a merchant of record model makes sense. The larger you are, especially in certain countries, the less a merchant of record model makes sense. Does that make sense? Yep.
I think that was great. Any questions around the merchant of record model at this point? I think it's a great model, but again, you're giving over 4 to 6%, if you will. And as Expand Now, that's like Thomas or the German guys, right?
It is. Yep.
And then
they're the new entry to the system, so they are significantly less price, less market success in history, but definitely a less expensive way to test the model.
If you have companies on Shopify, they partially own a company called Global E and another one called Flow.io, and folks are doing some stuff that's overlapping into this work as well.
So in that model,
That's right.
Record fulfillment is handled by you then?
No, fulfillment's handled by the merchant of record model.
Okay.
And some of them, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the merchant of record models have their own warehouses. For example, Global E does have some locally, but then they also have them overseas, and you ship to their local warehouse here. And then they take over ownership before it leaves the country.
It's exactly right. There's a variety of models that get supported: consignment models, ship from distribution, ship from warehouse. There's a variety of models.
You can ship from your own warehouse if you want. It can
Absolutely.
integrate into your existing
Okay, so
fulfillment.
you
You can.
drop ship over.
Yeah, but if you don't want to, you can ship and have it housed in their warehouse.
Okay.
Sure.
Is there a difference in the percentage they take with that?
Yes.
Yes, Jason, answer that one.
100%, yes. Basically, each of these models have different cost structures of basically the human overhead required to run them. And so the models that are, I'll say, a little bit more turnkey, that don't require either customer support or actually utilizing their fulfillment or any of those things, are definitely cheaper than ones where you actually need to utilize them for those services. So yeah, the answer is yes. And there are 4 providers who do these services, and I'd recommend you look into them. The first one I talked about is Digital River. Digital River does a great job in 3 verticals: consumer electronics, software, and gaming. They do the best job at the upper mid-market to the enterprises. Okay, so their customer list looks like Microsoft and Adobe and Autodesk and some of those companies. The company who is next on my list is Global E. They're a publicly traded company, and they have exclusive rights to provide cross-border inside of Shopify. And they do great in apparel and for SMBs. In the middle is a company called eShop World, or ESW, and they also provide local marketing services. And then the fourth choice is a newcomer to the market, which is Expand Now, which is trying to be more agnostic to a lot of those choices. Hopefully that answers your question.
That's super helpful, Jason. We have a question too.
Yeah, in this model, is the protection both with regard to financial risk and legal responsibility pretty robust?
Yes, in all of them, they're very robust.
Okay. That's
Yep.
okay.
And may I inject my company Crosshair?
No, you can. Yes, I was
I
going to
shall.
get to you.
I was going to say Crosshair, we do similar, whereas ESW and Globally are very effective in a number of ways. They don't do really well at dynamic markets because they're not built for Asia in particular. They're less influential in Latin America, but especially if you want to do China or you want to do Southeast Asia, Globally and ESW are not great platforms for you because they usually do have the higher customs rate and they haven't done the work in order to get that lower customs rate or lower shipping costs.
And before we have one more question, but Jeff, one of the things I was going to mention, and I'm that finger, by the way. Hi.
Hi.
I know also, Jeff, one of the funders of and investors in Crossterra, I worked with a lot in the past, and they've built out a lot of their own models around cross-border for one of the largest D2C retailers, which I can't talk about, but they're big and they're publicly traded. And one of the issues that they deal with also is duty drawbacks and other things like that, right? Which are integrated pieces. Duty drawbacks is the concept of if you've sold a product overseas and they've been charged duty for that product, then the person returns it to the US, let's say, who and how are you getting that return, those duties that they paid back to the consumer or back to the company? And at what point does the company pay the consumer back for what they paid? And often it can take 18 months to never for the company to recuperate the duties that they've charged the consumer, and then they've paid the consumer back for the return, but now they're stuck there in this limbo. And yes, well, yes. Jim has a question. You have to stop when Jim has a question.
Just to be clear, in all cases, regardless of the merchant record, I'm still, as the producer, using some sort of public consumer-facing marketplace or website.
Excellent question.
That's creating the demand for the product.
Do you guys? Yeah, I know Jason had a question. Yeah, go. I know what the answer. Yes, Jason. Jason?
That sounded more like a statement. Was there a question mark at the end of that?
It was a statement, but his inflection implied a question of he wants affirmation.
It's a true statement.
Yes, the answer is
Well,
yes.
so
yeah.
Yes, I mean, yeah, partial yes. It's not as definitive of yes as he would give you. So in the marketplace example, the marketplace in a lot of ways acts as the merchant in those scenarios, although there's actually a merchant standing behind him. The marketplaces are responsible for generating demand. So yes to that part. As it relates to, say, you doing business in Asia, well, this is where the brand themselves have to be responsible for building the brand in that market, having potentially an agency or at least using your skill set to get the products promoted and bought. The value of this merchant of record model really comes in, think of it as the cart and checkout experience where they're taking away that liability. But it doesn't limit the level of effort and required by the brand to actually get people to that point to want to buy it.
Yeah.
So, and marketplaces play a huge role there, and so do things like social commerce. The merchant of record model predominantly is most useful in the case of the merchant's own website. So, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, let me just dive into that. And then I am going to, because I want Taylor to have a chance to talk about the SEO and the infrastructure model for the IT architecture. But some of those services offer layers of the checkout, or even the entire website is a layer that's recreated in mirror of the US company's site. And so the consumer overseas thinks they're going to your site, but they're actually going to let's say the MOR's website, and they're purchasing on their checkout. Some of the cases, it doesn't involve the checkout. Mostly if the merchant of record is offering the payment solution, that's integrating the checkout and they control the checkout. Whereas if you're piecing this together yourself using like an Avalara for duty and taxes, and then you're doing fulfillment, but you're still controlling the payment, you the reason this is important is you can still control the checkout. And so controversially, a lot of the issues people have with merchant of record models is they take over the checkout, like you're saying, they add a layer, and then the merchant can't see what's happening.
That's a bit of a dated view. That's not how it works anymore. That's how it used to work for sure, Josh. But
That's my other finger. Okay. All right, give it to me. Bring us up to date. Bring us up to date then.
Well, that's not how it works. I mean, ultimately, the customer should never even know they're doing business with the merchant of record. Okay, they think they're doing business with Bole, or they think they're doing business with Logitech. And at the bottom of the page, it says something like, "This brand is utilizing an authorized reseller to perform these services on their behalf," something along those lines. And in all cases, and maybe it's not for Jeff, so I don't know. You have to tell me. The merchant owns the customer. The merchant owns the marketing rights. The merchant owns every aspect of it, with the exception of having to perform those duties. So it's really a perfect split. And in today's model, they're almost all purely headless or APIs only. So that old is gone. And again, I'm not in this business anymore, so I don't care.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's a differentiator there that if you want to do that model, basically ESW and Globally take over the checkout. So they're going to your website and they basically take over the checkout. And therefore, it's a little bit longer integration. We went in a different direction. I mean, we can do that, but because China's, three times larger than the US for e-commerce, and that's where we're really concentrating is Asia, China, India, these little tougher markets, we're doing something different. So most companies don't have a .cn because you have to get a Chinese ICP license and it's very difficult. And if you don't have a Chinese CN, you're not hosting in China, which means if you're a real graphic rich site, it's like the old AOL days where you wait for that image to load, especially if it's done on a mobile device, which is how most people in Asia actually access the internet. So from that perspective, we're doing sort of a crossterra.cn, or crossterra/Macy's.cn, and just hosting it ourselves on their behalf. We can port that over to their own .cn if they have a CN, but we did that just to sort of open up our services to a wider range of companies. That is usually the case.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay. And we'll put your info if anyone wants to get in touch. Let's just do a quick Taylor. Taylor, how do you say your last name properly?
Toussaint or
come on, give us a little bit.
Toussaint.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. We've got questions for you. Let's just talk here. What do brands get wrong when implementing international e-commerce as it relates to SEO?
Yeah. So I've done it both ways. I mean, ultimately you can either go country specific top level domain, which is like .co.uk or .ca or .fr or .br, whatever it is, right? Or you can do, Bole brand or bole.com/ca/fr/gb/whatever, right? That's how I do it. I've done it the previous way I mentioned. And the reason for that is, one, I'm always supposed to make stuff work as cheaply as possible and as profitably as possible, right? Just even from a operational standpoint, I can consolidate my analytics package. I can consolidate a lot of things with doing it this way. But I'm an SEO nerd. I love organic search, and those, when you have it under your main domain, meaning your .com/, everything within those folders or those subfolders or categories can kind of share in the love that your SEO is generating for your main US kind of property, right? Like, so let's say you built up a brand and it's popular in the US and you get some rankings organically for non-branded terms like sunglasses or something like that. Well, if you add on a subfolder for Germany and you do your translations right and you have some other layers and stuff, you can kind of feed off of that. You kind of get a little buy-in from Google in that region just because it already trusts you in the United States, which is the largest market and the leading market. So at a high level, the takeaway would be, my advice would be, don't go with a .co.uk or .br. Do your main domain / whatever country. So subfolders. That's what I would do.
And I would attest to that. I mean, Revolve.com, for example, one of the brands I've worked with too, is also large and they do a .com globally. If the common thought is, well, what happens if in Australia they're doing summer and we're doing winter? It's all IP address triggered. It's not an issue. So, okay. Next, poor translation. Is there something unique about you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like even from American English to UK English, there are differences. The way you say things, phrases, all that type of stuff. Where if you're not translating, if you're not localizing the language, it's not going to work out. It's going to be more difficult to rank, and then more importantly, the user experience it'll stick out like a sore thumb. Like this company doesn't care about my region. So you really have to either find a partner that you can trust that has experience doing this. Don't just go to Fiverr and pay somebody to translate your website. Don't use ChatGPT. Don't do any of that stuff. You really need professionals for this type of stuff currently.
Okay. Not using SEO. So SEO tools for accurately, what does that mean?
Yeah. So like you should also track this stuff. Again, from an organic search perspective, you should use something that can give you localized rankings, right? So again, I'll use Belay or Spy as an example, right? I'm tracking stuff for the US because Google US is different than Google FR, right? Like there's different ranking algorithms used to serve up the best user experience for the users in that locale, which is Google's goal. So I can't say if I'm killing it in the US, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm killing it in France. And so you can use a good tool to track that, use professional tools.
What are some tools?
I mean, to me, my favorite SEO tool is Ahrefs or Ahrefs. It's ahrefs.com.
Hold on. Say it again slowly.
So ahrefs.com. And to me, just in my experience, that's the number one SEO tool for tracking and stuff like that. And then Google does provide free tools, Google Merchant Center and Google Search Console and stuff like that. Those are good too. Any of your marketing people hopefully are aware of these tools.
Okay. What are some of the big differences in digital marketing and e-commerce different in countries and regions?
So you guys really touched on, there's just some of the hardcore stuff of like, there's laws of like, payments and accepting and refunds and like in Europe, right? Like let's say in the US you say, oh, I want a 30-day refund policy. Well, Europe in certain categories, it's like, no, it's 90 days. It's like you're going to accept a return no matter what for 90 days. Or MAP, minimum advertised price, right? Well, in the US, we're like, hey, we're all going to agree that we're going to sell at this price. Like if you have B2B relationships and all that stuff, it's kind of the retail price that's everyone agrees upon. Well, it's my understanding in Europe, that's just not a thing. You can't even like suggest a price. It's like, well, they'll just sell it for whatever. So it's like, there's a bunch of these unknowns that pop up when you don't have a team either in-house with experience in country or a third-party partner that's like, we got it, don't worry.
That's a good question though.
Taylor,
I'm going to bring it back to Jason as well, and maybe Jeff, but I mean, these merchant of record models and these other models, I mean, obviously a small business, I don't know that these are the laws in different countries. Who helps me figure those out in a way that's not cumbersome?
Yeah, I mean, there is no cheat code. I mean, you either take the burden of being responsible for that as the merchant, and you hire smart people like Taylor, or you go with a partner and you hire smart people like Jeff. That's really it.
Does the merchant of record model do that as well, though? They take care of that stuff?
Well, they'll advise you on making sure that your compliance on some of the things that Taylor talked about around returns obligations, privacy obligations, things like GDPR, can't spam, or things that kind of govern the local markets. Again, when you're allowing them to transact in that market for you, they're signing up for that liability. And so anything related to regulations, compliance, laws, for the most part, is if it's connected to the transaction, they have to bring that responsibility in. There are other things that are more social norms, or even things around like how you drive traffic effectively, et cetera, that you would rely on agency partners or your own expertise to navigate. So, Taylor, Jeff, you agree with my assessment?
Yeah, definitely.
Let's just talk a little bit about this no map thing. Could you explain that a little further? Because that's just huge that you can't set a price in Europe. People don't know that.
I mean, for me, so I work with a group of brands that, we sell D2C and we sell retail via wholesale or distribution, right? And in the US, the reason you go into a store or online, for the most part, that something is the same price, that's because it's a MAP policy or MSRP or whatever these acronyms that, whoever wants to come up with at the time says, this is the agreed price that we're going to sell and everybody's going to be able to make the margin that they can make. In Europe, at least from the team that I interface with over there, they're like, no, like you can't even, you do not talk about MAP. It's like, you can't talk, you literally cannot talk about MAP, and because it's like an antitrust or blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know the reasons. I'm just like, okay, cool. Well, I don't, then I guess we just make more margin, selling D2C and hopefully you have good partnerships with distribution and retailers, and they're not, it's not a race to the bottom or anything like that. That's kind of what I mean. Yeah,
you see this in fashion a lot, Josh, where in the US, because they have MAP pricing, even your discounts have to follow what the brand allows. So you can't really discount more than, you might have a little bandwidth to discount 10%, but to go 20, 30, 40%, you need to get their permission, and it's on a seasonal basis. But Europe considers that price collusion. And so the only thing Europeans can do to control their channel partners is soft power. They can say, hey, boutique, yes, you can sell that Burberry scarf for 50% off. But if you do that and we find out about it, you're no longer one of our partners. And so that's why companies like Farfetch or in China, Douyin Poison, get really big, because if they can sell these products anonymously or semi-anonymously through the back door, through the web, that's a great way for them to get rid of stuff without actually, hopefully offending Burberry or some of these other brands that are selling them products.
We have questions. Yes.
What would be the drawback in what looks more efficient, like just placing your product that you sell to consumers into a local e-commerce platform?
You mean like a marketplace, for example?
Yeah.
Like Lazada or something?
Whatever it is, each country has its own, like we have Amazon here.
So the drawbacks of selling through marketplaces. Questions. I'll give you guys some time. So one of the drawbacks, again, I think it's one of the greatest ways for especially SMBs to get into a market. You've already got a platform that's localized, it's mobile optimized, it's got the local currency, all that stuff. You don't wait, I didn't get to my point yet. Jesus.
Sorry, I'm so excited.
Well, hurry up.
Okay, the problem is you don't have visibility over the consumer as much, so you don't know who's buying what. But now say it. That was all. Yeah, go. Did I get it? No.
I mean, immediately. So yes, like owning the customer, understanding that, like first party data. I mean, you should start to hear a lot about that. And then margin. I mean, usually, where do you want to? Money's great. More money's better. So it's like those are probably the two primary. And if you're a brand, control of your brand, like control on brand, the experience, all those things. Those are probably my three primary things.
Let me just scratch that a little further, because you said some things that I think are a little more complex. So first of all, control of your brand. My response would be, what are you talking about? I control my brand on Amazon. I see it. But no, you're talking about the brand experience is a lot more robust on a website, or when you can go direct, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could perceivably do loyalty, email market. Like, I mean, it's just like the cost of owning the customer, and then you get into lifetime value and customer acquisition costs and all these types of things that all of a sudden it's like, you know, on a marketplace, it's kind of one and done, and you're really gonna have to vie to, like, how much repeat business are you gonna get without having to apply the same marketing dollars that it cost to acquire them in the first place, right? So these are all the things.
This is particularly interesting now with the competing of the Temus and the Sheins and the others of the world. The Chinese come in, and I've got great companies who go on Amazon, and then after they get a good sale, within 2 or 3 weeks, what happened? Oh, bye.
Oh, he left.
Okay. One of the things that happens, you can't, as you say, capture that consumer for the lifetime of them being a consumer, because then tomorrow they're looking at a similar product, but it's slightly cheaper, and they buy that because they're on the marketplace already. It's very easy. So it's really hard to retain that and create that stickiness. But it is also where all the consumers are. So to get started, you sometimes will do that. What people will do to play both of those is they'll create unique bundles or unique SKUs or unique items for a marketplace, but something unique for their own website, or unique bundles. And bundling is a big thing right now. If you're going to go on an Amazon and sell on stuff, if you actually want to sell on TikTok or on your own website, you can't sell apples to apples what's on Amazon, because Amazon will ding you for saying, hey, you're selling it for cheaper, or you're selling it somewhere else. There's a lot of challenges around that. But if you say, hey, I've got a bundle, I'm not selling the same thing. I'm selling these 3 items plus this other 4th item as a bundle, that is not the equivalent of what I'm selling on Amazon. And then you kind of can start getting around that.
And by the way, real quick on that, on
Yeah.
the Amazon thing, sorry. Amazon doesn't enforce MAP either. So it's a marketplace. If you're a brand and a company, it can be a very challenging marketplace. And bundling can be a way around the idea of truly you have a unique offering that you can direct your audience to, and they'll guaranteed to purchase from you. So that's a whole separate topic that would require
That's really
hours
good.
of
That's very
conversation.
helpful. We have another question as well.
Yeah, so, and this, I guess it was briefly mentioned, was margins. And, you know, a lot of the clients that we're getting are, you know, they're very early exporters, and they're just trying to make the decision if it's a good move for them to go. And a lot of times I'm suggesting, you know, let's go third-party platform, test the waters, because it, you know, it's a lot easier for entry. But I guess, is there a margin that they should be hitting before they even start to look at that? I mean, the pie's only so big, right? And you start giving them away chunks of that pie when you go with some of these merchant services. Is there a hard, fast rule on what type of margins they should be generating before they could even dabble into this space?
I mean, me personally, it's going to vary from business to business. Ultimately, I don't have like a specific margin percentage that I say, hey, blah, blah. It's really on a case by case basis for me.
What were the merchants I mean, if we go with like a full merchant experience, what type of cut are they going to take out off the top? Generally.
So I've never used like a Digital River or a third party service. Jeff, I mean, would you have an idea?
I wouldn't work
For transaction, they do 6%.
merchant of record. Yeah, merchant of record will generally take 6% of your international sales.
Okay.
But Jeff,
Which is not much more than US credit card
Yeah,
percentage
credit card
rates.
fees are
Like,
3% all
right?
day.
And
so,
frankly,
yeah.
yeah. Jeff,
Well,
when
we
you
do. Yeah, go ahead.
when we used to talk about BorderX, and we have what are we out of time?
3:15, so you got 17
Yeah.
minutes.
Okay, great, because we have some more questions. Okay, so with BorderX Labs, which is the marketplace going into China, for example, we had to look a lot at the margins. What are some of the margins, and what, like, a lot of beauty products have higher margins. That's why they tend to be good options. But can you talk about that a little?
Well, I mean, I would say take a step back when you talk about margins, because in some cases margins don't matter. And I'll just put it this way, because the service fees, like at BorderX Lab, there's 2 opportunities in cross-border. There's price asymmetry, where a product is cheaper than in the US than it is overseas. And you'll find that, like in Latin America right now, usually Air Jordans are twice as expensive as they are in the US. And in China, when I started, US and European products in China were 20% to 100% more expensive in China than they were the US. Now that's changed a little bit on some different product categories. So there was that price asymmetry. And so in that case, it got to a point at Border X Lab, like we would work with companies that would only give us 1% margin, but we knew we could mark it up 15% and still have very robust sales within that marketplace because of that price asymmetry. And it wasn't about every product. And especially like if company was having a sale on a particular product, we would just mirror that natural sale that's 20% off North Face and Upsy jackets. Well, suddenly, hey, we just mark it up to its normal price. We make 20% margin, and it's still lower than in China. But you can also do product asymmetry. And so a lot of times a particular product set isn't available for whatever reason. Maybe the company just isn't in these foreign markets yet. It's something that caught on in social media, or maybe something they saw traveling internationally, or they were at an airport, or they saw it on media. There's a lot of happy accidents that occur that suddenly people want your brand. So either of those you can take advantage of. And I would say, going back to the marketplace, marketplaces, I always tell people, hey, marketplaces are great. That's where the eyeballs are. Unfortunately, they're Jeff Bezos's eyeballs, they're Jack Ma's eyeballs, and they charge you very dearly for them. And oftentimes, yeah, it starts with 10%, fee, but then you're doing FBA, then you're doing advertising within the platform, and suddenly your margin, you're losing 40, 45% on every sale. And sometimes Amazon actually starts buying that product and competing against you directly once you get to a particular level of success. And so, companies like mine, we do 15%, but with that we cover international shipping as well, and it's only on incremental sales. So, from that perspective, it's more a point of, how competitive do you want your products to be? What's the markup involved? How much do you have to discount, and figuring out what the market will bear. So I wouldn't let just the straight, what are my margins going into this, factor in until I actually looked at the market and saw what the price is in the market of that product now. Is it popular? Is it have some traction? Is it something I could sell? But
Thanks, Jeff. Let me just
long-winded answer, but
That's
hopefully.
great. No, just bring it down to SMB land too a little bit though, because a lot of companies don't have product that has the demand that you're talking about, where people say, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to get it for a little bit cheaper if I go, through cross-border marketplace, let's say. But that it is expensive for a lot of our companies to go outside of marketplaces because they do have to build brand recognition, and that's a lot of money.
It is.
So marketplaces tend to be a good place to start, frankly. I do think that there's opportunities at some point, and also if you find your niche and your tribe through social, then you do have people who love and follow you, and that's why I keep going back to find your tribe on Instagram and TikTok, because those people who found you and follow you on social are willing to pay that extra amount to get the product that they cannot get in their local community, right? So I do think that that's where you start to get those margins, quote unquote, that you want. And we do see companies, especially in the beauty space, they have a lot of nice margin. If we're going tomorrow, we'll be talking about B2B piece, and I'm going to have someone break down what a margin would look like to go to a distributor. Highlands Baby Products will be talking about how they deal with the margin structure for a distributor, then the retail people in the marketplaces. We have a question in the back as well. Yeah.
Just more a question, but also a comment that keep in mind that when you're talking about all this pricing, you have to think about customs valuation standards. They don't always match these up. So how you come up with your valuation and what's declared to customs.
Yeah, that's a good question. And you
different issues.
Say your name and your
Tony Campus. In a previous life, I worked in U.S. Customs. I've been involved with a lot of different stuff over the years internationally. The other thing I would say is don't memorize anything, because there's change not only in the U.S. around the world right now. There's a lot of movement to change a lot of e-commerce regulations. I was just reading about Turkey lowering their de minimis. So if a de minimis is $25, how do you define the $25? So it's more than just tariffs and things. You might get an expedited admissibility or have more or less things or not. Just because things are going across borders that are quote low value shipments doesn't mean they're doing it right in any country.
I've had the pleasure of having a call with Tony, and if you have any questions around customs or any of those issues, see him. He's also the best proponent for a merchant of record model, because everything he knows is stuff that I would not want to deal with. And so that's why, it's so complex and all these changes. So getting some other organization to do it for me And it doesn't just have to be a merchant of record model. Avalara does it. They'll be speaking actually tomorrow. Zonos as well will do it. These others that'll deal with it because they have teams that have to deal with this headache.
Yeah, I mean, just to throw that last thing out, so if there is an expedited process for importing in whatever country around the world, and it's based on some kind of value, what is that value? Does it match the kind of values you're talking about? I'd say probably not. Some of the customs definitions, evaluations are still the same as
Yeah.
they've been since the Brussels value declaration going back, but there is a big change, not only in the US, people talk about how that's, a lot of this might go away, but it's not only in the US, it's around the world. World Customs Organization, a lot of countries, EU,
Yes.
et cetera. So just-
I will dovetail on that to ask a question, unless there's other questions, but before we close out, one of the things I will talk about as a weird kind of thing, I'm gonna ask Taylor if you do this as well. The de minimis in the US is $800. If you're familiar with following, it's finally actually come to the level of consciousness in America, but for many years, no one understood or even knew this. $800 means that a product can come into the market and not be taxed if it's under the $800 de minimis threshold.
Okay.
What's happened, and the reason why we know Shein and we know Temu and all those, is because they place inventory in Tijuana. They wait until someone purchases it, they send it over to the US direct to the consumer, and they don't pay any duties and taxes. So that beautiful idea of taxing China with lots of and doing the whole trade war just sent them all to Mexico and then going cross-border under our $800 de minimis, which is why they all exist there. Small businesses don't know this, but they can do the same thing. There's no reason they can't. There are companies that do this on a smaller scale in Tijuana as well. Whether or not this will change and the Senate will vote against this and somehow this it is up for grabs. We've been talking about it for years, but it may actually come to pass. But however, all these big companies are doing that. I don't know if Taylor, do you guys source from Asia and then do you do D2C in that way at all?
So two of our brands we're manufactured. We have a manufacturing in Asia. That kind of, I'll say, sneaky distribution method we do not apply. We're kind of,
I didn't know if I'd get you to say it anyway, but I don't know. You probably.
I mean, listen, some of our partners wouldn't want to do business with a company that does that. Like, we're a real company and stuff like that. So,
but just so you understand, I mean, a lot of companies in the US do it too. I mean, I don't know, Jeff, if you have experience with it, but I know, I don't want to say either, but I know many companies that are billion-dollar publicly traded companies. That's what they're doing. I mean, it's not even a loophole. It's actually a legal solution.
So sure, there's I understand. We don't operate that way. We receive and we have distribution in the countries we operate.
Yeah.
Oh, Jeff,
you're on mute. You're on mute, but
I was going to say, it's weird that companies are using NAFTA, or they're sort of weaponizing NAFTA, because Shein and Temu actually ship product in the US, and then they ship it out of the US to different Latin American countries where you have trade agreements, because they know if it goes from China directly to Colombia or Ecuador, they're going to pay a high fee on that, a high customs charge. So they'll send it to US, and then it looks like it's coming from the US. So it touches down in Miami or Laredo or LA or wherever the case may be. It's fascinating how people use these different ways in order to avoid doing any customs. But to that point, I do think de minimis law probably will change just because of Shein and Temu, and I mean they're really hollowing out a lot of U.S. businesses and manufacturers.
Thank you. Okay, so just to close out, I don't know if there's any other comments you guys have. Think about them. I'm coming back to you. Any other questions you have? We've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. We've talked about selling direct to consumer. We've talked about merchant of record model versus creating your own hybrid of that, where you have someone taking care of duties and taxes, taking care of logistics. We've talked a little about SEO structure. How do you build the structure properly for global expansion to manage and take the juice for that SEO? So that whole history of when you speak, I find I've been an advisor as well for the SBDC. When I speak to clients and then I speak to their agencies, a lot of their agencies are making money off of making things more complex from a global perspective. They do it from any perspective, but global is a wonderful one because they kind of start to get excited because they say, wow, no, a lot of people don't know what it is, and I'm going to make this really complex, and then I'm going to charge a lot. I'm going to create $15,000 multi-translation builds for different websites. I'm going to tell them they need their FR and we need to do this. I'm going to tell them the complexities of duty and tax. I will tell you that there are plugins for all of it. It's usually on a percentage of sale, if not at the $100 a month level, not more than that. So you can say global and say yes to global on day one. You can do it if you're on Shopify. It's already in there with most of the stuff we talked about. If you're on a WooCommerce, which is off of a WordPress, all these plugins exist. Zonos, Avalara, and all these other companies will work with that. If you're on a BigCommerce, same thing. So really, I just caution everybody to not relinquish guidance to some of these agencies that are very much motivated to make this more complex than it is. It is complex, as Tony will attest to, but the people who are doing it, because it's complex, have come in to solve that problem. Yeah, anything else anyone wants to mention? No? Yes?
I mean, I just want,
Yeah, leave us with some words of wisdom, Taylor and Jeff. So, Taylor, you first.
So a couple themes here, right? Like, so don't just think of it domestic and international. The different markets are just completely different beasts, animals, whatever you want to call it. Europe, South America, Asia, like different. You're not going international. You want to look into a specific market. Like that's what I would say. It is international, but just having that. And then be serious about it, I guess I would say is so a lot of times this isn't, I mean, you can tip your toe kind of in the water with like a marketplace and stuff like that. If you have to assign it a budget, you have to assign it, when is it going to be profitable as a business? You have to be serious about this. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. You should realize it's like starting a business. There's going to be some losses up front, but in the long run, you're going to be profitable if you execute properly. And that's it. Thanks for having me, guys. That's it.
Thank you. Jeff.
Ooh, put me on the spot.
Okay.
Come back and follow, but no, I would just say, the 15 to 30%, I think, is a good marker, what you should strive for in terms of your sales, your global sales. Almost every brand, if it has appeal in the US, it'll have appeal globally as well. In some market, not in all markets, but in some markets. And internationally, I always call it, it's a world of happy accidents. I remember we sold, in the course of 6 months, we sold about $1 million worth of football cleats in China because Ultimate Frisbee got popular, and a lot of social media posts went around that football cleats are much better than soccer cleats, and no one had soccer or football cleats anywhere in Asia, pretty much. And so suddenly we sold so many football cleats from Dick's Sporting Goods, Foot Locker, Finish Line. You see a lot of these sort of happy accidents come up due to social media and the global nature of social media these days. I wouldn't say you can count on them, but there's certainly different opportunities globally that if you're there to take advantage of this good luck, you can do quite well, and you can have some really good impact for your business without really even putting marketing dollars in. And if you can master social media and figure out, to Josh's point, who your tribe is and who are the people that appeal most to you, there's a lot of really interesting avenues to sort of build a user base and to build a loyal following. It's a fascinating world these days, switches quickly.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to just close out with one comment, and then again, feel free to QR code scan these folks. But we have 4 sessions coming up. Before I get into that, though, just again, social commerce. Imagine a world 20, 30 years ago where you were two hardware stores are down the block, and you're actually able to go see your competitors' traffic. Every person who goes in that person's store. How much they're selling. The volume. The price points. That world exists today. It has tools in it. You can go to Jungle Scout and see what's selling on Amazon at what price points by whom. You can go to EchoTick or FastMoss, all these others that do TikTok analysis of what's selling by which influencers and which products. And you can do it on a global scale. So this idea that you can see what's selling everywhere as a small business, it is the day for the reckoning of these big businesses that dominate the data flow. You can have your clients go out there, and if they have a social media presence, they have their finger on the pulse of people around the world and leverage that, because it will give you these weird cleat things that come up. They should be the first to know because they're gonna have a tribe asking for it all of a sudden, and if they're analyzing it close enough, they're gonna see, wait, why are people all of a sudden from Argentina asking for, you know, I don't know, barbecue skewers from, you know, those are the things that they need to know. So with that, we have 4 sessions coming up again in about an hour, or maybe
At 4:45, in a half hour.
half hour. We've got social commerce for cross-border, different speakers. We've got tomorrow, we've got B2B commerce, different speakers, and then we've got fulfillment. Some great speakers flying in, virtually flying in. Jeff Taylor, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Great conversation.